The Lord be with you, and welcome to session 12 of the story Genesis. You know that phrase, the Lord be with you, it's a greeting that Christians often say to one another, usually in worship, but at other times as well. And the response is usually, and also with you. In reality, this greeting, it's way more than just a, hey, how you doing? It really is a prayer of blessing, asking for God's presence. Well, the Lord certainly was with Joseph. That's the first verse of Genesis 39, where we're starting today. Open your Bibles, and we'll find out what happens for Joseph and for God's promise. Indeed, the Lord was with Joseph, and that says it all. Like runners passing the torch in a race, God's promise, land, descendants, blessing, God's promise has been passed from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob and now to Joseph. He now carries the promise of a future for Israel. To be sure, having the Lord's presence doesn't make life always easy for Joseph. The Lord's presence doesn't keep him from being sold into slavery by his jealous brothers. And that's where we find him as chapter 39 begins. So open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 39, and let's read together. We're starting with verse 1 of chapter 39. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. He made him an overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and with him there, he had no concern for anything but the food that he ate. The Lord certainly was with Joseph. Joseph prospers serving Potiphar, and Joseph is successful. And because God blesses Joseph, Potiphar's life is blessed too. His whole household and his fields prosper. But trouble is just around the corner. Pause the video for just a moment and read the rest of chapter 39. Joseph is in charge of everything, and his master's wife tries to seduce him. At verse 8 we read, he refused. Joseph knows all too well that he is still a servant, but he is a servant who is very much trusted by his master, a servant whose master has given him all kinds of power and authority. How could he do this great wickedness against his master? And also for Joseph, how could he sin against God? Well, the answer is he won't do either of those things. And he says no. Potiphar's wife then tries to retaliate by accusing Joseph. The master believes his wife, so Joseph unjustly lands in prison. But even so, the Lord is still with Joseph, and even in prison he prospers. The chief jailer puts him in charge of all the other prisoners. And in chapters 40 and 41, Joseph uses his dreaming skills to interpret dreams for 3 people. You really should read those chapters, but here's what happens. The king of Egypt is upset with 2 of his servants. It's the cupbearer and the baker. Each of these servants has a dream, and Joseph interprets them. The cupbearer's dream is good news, and Joseph asks the cupbearer to remember down the road that Joseph helped him. But the baker's dream is very bad news. Again, you really need to read the details of those dreams. Joseph is in prison, and everyone has forgotten him, even the cupbearer to whom he brought good news. Everyone has forgotten him except the Lord. And someone else is dreaming now. Pause the video once more and read through chapter 41. Joseph tells Pharaoh that the dreams mean Egypt will experience 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of terrible famine. Joseph has a great idea about what Pharaoh needs to do about all of this. Select a man who is discerning and wise, Joseph suggests. He may as well have said, like me, for example. Well, of course, Pharaoh does know just the man for the job, and so he sets Joseph over all of Egypt. He takes his own ring off and puts it on Joseph's finger, and so Joseph manages the country as people from all over, and actually all over the world, come looking for food during the famine. Indeed, the Lord is with Joseph. Despite being sold into slavery by his brothers, despite languishing in prison for so long, the Lord blesses Joseph. The Lord makes everything he does prosper. And Joseph gives credit to the Lord for all that happens. He tells Pharaoh that it's the Lord who gives him the interpretation of dreams. And he lets his own children know that God made him forget all of his hardship, even forgetting the home of his boyhood, his brothers, even forgetting his father and mother. There's more to come for Joseph. His story is the story of God acting to bring about the promise made long ago to Abraham: land, descendants, blessing. But what God is doing through Joseph isn't really evident, not to Joseph or to anyone else. Maybe you have realized only after the fact, like Joseph, that God had brought about something in your life, and you didn't realize it until sometime later. Joseph's story is also one about learning about God's blessing. Yes, being blessed gave him riches and power in the end, but being the one chosen by God, it also brought about the loss of his family, it brought about time in prison, and it brought a good bit of suffering. Joseph's story is one of showing the power of God as opposed to the power of earthly rulers. God certainly works, hidden behind the scenes. God works to put Joseph in the right place, to provide for people all over the world during the famine. God's power does that. Earthly power, on the other hand, the power of the Pharaoh, with all of his armies and all of his finery, earthly power had no chance at all against the famine. As chapter 41 ends, Joseph is famous, he is prosperous, and he is not hungry. His brothers and his family, though, they are starving. They plan to travel to Egypt because they've heard rumors that in Egypt there is food. They don't know what else they're going to find there. And we'll find out that for ourselves next week. Do plan to come back to the story Genesis in the next session.